This video is going to teach you the tricks of the trade when it comes to effortlessly creating these conversion rates that you so desperately desire. But most websites actually struggle to even keep people on the site for more than a few seconds. Now, the difference between a great website and an amateur website isn't probably as big as you might think. Now, the best way to demonstrate this is actually to do a direct comparison, right? So we're finding them in the similar kind of niches of what they offer, and then we're going to do direct comparisons so that you can see those differences, learn from them, and improve on your own sites. I always like to just caveat this that I'm not criticizing for the sake of criticizing, right? We're here to just critique these and learn as a whole. You know, these amateur sites that I'm referencing, as I'm calling them, are still big, well-known companies. There's just way more that could be done with them to really catapult their conversions, just like some of these more expert ones are. So let's dig in. Now, the way I'm going to do this first one, which is down to wallets when we get onto it, is we're going to look at the category page for them and then the product detail page or the product single, depending on the language that you guys use. I think it's nice for us to have a look at that category page first, look at how they're kind of allowing the user to navigate and kind of peruse the site, and then we'll get more into that selling page afterwards. I'm going to do that for the more amateur one that I'm showing you in a second compared to this main one. Now let's load this up here, and we've got Wallet King. First things first, as we load on it, obviously it looks okay. I think the overall kind of feel of the site and the typography, the overall styling of it feels a little bit value-led is probably the nicest way of putting it. And that's not necessarily wrong, right? It's indicative of the prices that they've got here. These are slightly cheaper in style than wallets. There's some slightly unusual choices that we're going to run through in a little bit of detail now. So first off, obviously they've got this affordable prices, high quality materials. Presumably that's there for search engines, right? This takes up a lot of information and it's clearly there for a search engine and isn't particularly valuable to the user. And I'd like us to do something a little bit more with that to really sell these a little bit more. This dotted line around the outside feels like an editing function as well. It feels out of place, and to be honest, I think the overall design would probably look cleaner if that box wasn't around it. It's also quite strange that, you know, I'm quite a large monitor here, but it feels strange that the split is just high quality materials on its own. I feel like that probably should have gone from affordable prices, high quality materials on a second line if I was desperate to keep it on there. And obviously we have gone with centrally aligned. I would probably be tempted to look if this looked better on the left or centrally aligned, but the overall balance of the text is just down. Now the biggest one I would say that when I'm on the category page is if I just show the user every single thing that I can possibly buy, it's very overwhelming, right? If you can imagine when you go onto Netflix, you don't look at every single film. Most people will be like, oh, just show me the thrillers or just show me the top 10. We want those filterization options. If I look at this particular site, the filters don't actually work. I have no way of applying a filter to any of these. So instead, I have to purely base it on the information that I'm kind of gathering from a blank wallet. And it's really hard to kind of tell what I can do. Can I put coins? Can I put wallets? Is it RFID protective? Like there's lots of things in here that I'm not getting any of that overall information on. And I'm having to cycle down and pretty much base everything on the overall price. So it's not great. If we focus all the way down, there's then just all this content here, which again is going to be purely there for search engines. This isn't anything that's going to be of any value to a user. Users know that. And I feel like it's a wasted opportunity that we could probably have done more information there. Yes, we still want that content there to help it rank. I'm not taking away from that. I think there's just more that could probably be done. So let's take this wallet here. We're going to look at this vintage style wallet, right? So we're now going to get onto the individual product page. Again, the overall site feels very value in its overall style. Maybe some of the use of the fonts that have been chosen, some of the overall colorways. This green here, you know, classic back in the day when we did A/B split testing and no one really knew what they were doing. There was this argument of, oh, green and positive colors are the ways that we have to go. And I imagine that's almost why this green button is here, because it does feel quite out of place when you look at the overall kind of icon and colors that are being used on the site. The green does feel a little bit out of place. Obviously, this is fine. We've got the reviews that are on here, and we've got this add to reviews, so that is okay. It might be useful to have a stock ID or this sort of information higher up next to this would normally make sense. And then we do have a little bit of information. Kind of strange choice to then put this in gray. I feel like it slightly mutes it. There might be a decision on that, but it feels a little bit out of place. And then the imagery that we've got feels very busy, right? There's a lot going on here. Even like that feels overly busy. And I appreciate from their point of view that they're trying to visually showcase how much this can fit in it. But I'm still having to read everything. So in here, does it reference how many? It goes 8 credit cards that I can hold, 3 pocket compartments, and more. For me, I kind of just want to know all the information. That's kind of the point of me choosing a wallet. And I want to make sure that's really crystal clear for me to highlight out that, you know, I want X type of wallet. Is this going to work? I would also highlight that, you know, I'm coming at this from a point of view of some people are just purely buying a wallet because it looks nice, and that's fine. But for quite a lot of us, we want to know how practical that thing is. We want to be able to carry that all the time with us. As we go down here, again, you've you've got this sort of information that's really strangely laid out. And for me, this is a prime example of what I would refer to as like amateur. The number of fonts and changes that we have is huge. Like I kind of want one or maybe two fonts at most. We have this title that's really thin. We then have a very large white gap that doesn't feel like it needs to be there at all. That could be higher up. We have a little bit of information on here. The unisex design is then highlighted in a different sized font. This font is slightly bigger than this font. This font feels too small. We then go large again. We seem to jump around in styles of fonts, and all of these things combined just feel very amateur. It also feels like we're repeating a lot of the information over and over again, presumably for a search engine. We really need some considerations in this to make sure it's really standing out. Related products for me don't necessarily relate. Maybe this vintage one does, and I know they say vintage in them, but I feel like the person that's buying this one above probably doesn't want a skull on it. We need to have a little think about what goes on there. I would also say that when I get down to the overall add to basket button, we want to keep that as clean, as simple, as obvious as possible. Let's just remove some of this clutter. We don't need the social icons right next to it. We're just giving the user another alternative to not buy the thing that we want them to buy. There's probably also an argument of whether we want the email, or I'm not even sure what some of these things mean. Like the heart obviously means a wish list, but I've got to sign up. I don't know what this one means. Let's have a look. Comparison list, there you go. And then presumably this one is to email me. So quite unclear icons. I'm just not even sure we need those. Split them out or move them. Maybe the wish list should be kept, but you normally have the wish list maybe up here on the right hand side, a little bit further out of the way. We're decluttering this add to basket, then it's very clear what we want the user to interact with. More information is fine, but there's not really much to go off here. For me, that's maybe been a really nice, easy place to have broken out everything that the card, that the wallet can hold. And then obviously you do have some reviews, which are fine. They're not hugely detailed at the end of the day, and maybe they could have been. And we've got some examples of that in a little bit. But overall, you can hopefully see that from that point of view, there's a lot that could really have been done with this website to make it really stand out a lot more. And that's what we're going to look at this next one. So this next one we're going to look at is called Bellroy wallets. I'm not going to lie to you, I do have a Bellroy wallet. I love them. This is not a sponsored video, so please don't worry. But they just work really well. And now looking at this category page, you can hopefully feel the difference. First thing they're doing, which is nice and easy for a product website to do, is they're generally cutting these out. So you'll see that they've removed the background and they're just having the imagery on its own with a nice little bit of shadow. Doing that is a really nice way just to unclutter the entire look of the site and make it very clear on what we're buying. The in-situ shots where it's on a table or in use or in your hand, we definitely want those, and maybe those are on internal pages, but we don't necessarily want them on a category page. We want to keep them very simple to start with, so that's one thing to bear in mind. If you reference back to the title that I mentioned before, is this one's a little bit nicer. It's kind of selling me on it. It's premium, durable, they feel great, they age beautifully, so the overall language is a lot stronger on this version. And then this is, for me, is the big winner on this page, is this filtering system. Like, I know how many cards are in my wallet, so actually if I have less than 5 cards, I can probably have a different wallet to the one where I need more than 10, like I've clicked on here, or the one where I do want a card area as well, and I also want it to hold my phone. So you can start to see these differences on here about how this is really useful, and actually only show me the ones you've got in brown, and only show me ones made of leather because I'm a vegan and I don't want to use proper leather. All of a sudden this page feels really, really beneficial to the user, rather than the last one that we looked at, which just has everything on it and you have to make those decisions yourself. If we then click into one, let's just go on this one here, which is supposedly a bestseller. Again, we've got a nice kind of image that just kind of really cleanly explains what it is. I think this for me is also a really big win, and I know this is really niche to wallets, but please try and think of a way you can relate this to your company. On the other one that we saw is they put real cards in there and real money, so it automatically made everything look very busy. They're purposely using just a simple white card, or in some of these other ones, simple white cards or simple white paper, that just gives you a much better understanding of how much that can really hold in it. The other thing is that they do have this orange that runs throughout their brand, and they then use this orange very sparingly, but the orange adds a really nice contrast to the button, so it's got this nice add to cart. We've got free shipping, we've got the overall pricing of it, and then we've got some key information that can all be seen here. But I think this for me is the big thing that was missing in the last one, is just bullet points, right? The information that's really key to the user, we don't want hidden away in big paragraphs. We want it to be readable and findable, so it can hold this number 1. You've got your protection, you've got a quick access card slot, you've got all these additional things that come with it, and even just representing it via icons is another really nice way of doing it. And for most people, even if they just did this top section, I think this would be a huge improvement to what we've already seen. But the really nice thing about Bellroy is that, you know, that might be enough for a lot of the users, but some users might need a little bit more salesmanship to them. So in that case, they can scroll down the page and they can learn a lot more, and they get to see some of these photos of in situ and how it might work, broken, how the bills fit in, and where the business card protection is. And they're really answering it from a point of view very benefits driven. There's a lot that we can do, and this is probably my favorite image. It's like, this is the amount of stuff that we can fit inside this wallet. Now if you compare that back to the last one where it was kind of an image with the wallet loaded with loads of stuff in it and it looked really busy, not only was that not great because it looked busy, it was hard for you actually to decipher how much was in there, but this image here gives you a much clearer representation of how much that can fit in it. It's going to sell the user. So those are the sort of things you can think about. It doesn't always have to be great design. Obviously it helps that this site is beautifully designed, but really thinking through the sort of objections and concerns the user might have and then designing for that purpose. That for me is the big win. Great, so we've kind of done with wallets to start with. I'm aware if you saw one of my last videos that I got very excited and I covered like 5 different websites, in fact 10, because we did 5 different industries and therefore an amateur and a pro of each one. So for this one we're just going to do one more comparison, which is going to be on mattresses. And the reason I've kind of chosen these disparate kind of versions is that what we want to be able to do is, if we can really understand how to sell a particular product and understand all those potential objections the user has, we can visually answer those in a really nice way. Now, as I start to do more of these videos, you might get into some of those nuances a little bit further down the line, where we go with a site that might sell lots of different things and we have to be a lot more generic. But for now, I want to keep these examples focused on these so that we can have the maximum amount of learning that we possibly can. And with that being said, we're going to look at Bedworld. So Bedworld, as the name would suggest, sells all things beds. If we kind of go on with the mattress options here, we have an overall zoom in so we can kind of see a little bit of a photo of it. There is an option to click through, but the photos don't really reveal a lot. They don't necessarily do a lot of salesmanship to me. They do have some of these nicer icons down here at the bottom with the options that are on here. But I would say there's fundamentally a large flaw with this particular site, which is down to color theory. So they've obviously got the green that they're using in the logo, and they should probably be using that more sparingly. But if I just take a sit back and look at this, my eyes are drawn to this red, which is this 10% offer. So that's fine. Obviously, if they really want to push me to get 10% off, that's great. But after that button, if we were really honest, it's like, okay, what's the next thing that my eyes are drawn to? It's like, okay, well, it's this green button down here, which doesn't involve me buying, and it's an additional 5% off here in this green bar. Whereas really the thing we want to draw attention to is the add to basket button, which is currently not green until I put this information in. So I have to put that information in here. Now when I select that down here, if it's really key that I choose an option, the option should stand out more. And even the overall hierarchy and sizing of everything feels a little bit off. We have a fairly large title, very large icons, very large price, it probably doesn't need to be that big, and then we have this options bar which doesn't really particularly stand out. And I appreciate from their point of view that they're trying to make this add to basket void, like we don't want the user to interact with them until they picked an option, but make that crystal clear. For me, I would probably, a bit like we saw on the Bellroy website, I would have all of these options on show at once, and I would have them so you can click around them and you could see a little image of them. If we did it that way, it's going to be a lot clearer the overall difference, and I would probably have one default already ready to buy, so that if they've already liked that look at one, and they'll know what's most common, right? If most people are buying a double, let's have that as our default when the user first lands on the page, so we have an idea of price, and then the user can make a change from there. But we don't do any of that. Instead, we leave it very open, and it feels really confusing for us to interact with. As we cycle down, there is some basic information here, right? And it is fairly nicely laid out, so you can digest, you can check the sizing, so we are checking some of those concerns. If anyone has any questions around delivery, we are answering some of those. We're not answering absolutely everything. This is very standard information. What might be nice to you to know is, are you going to help me in? Are you going to bring it upstairs for me? Is it all folded up in a little box, or is it going to come really large? Like, we don't really answer any of those questions. And then the overall sustainability policy, again, feels super generic. There's a lot more that could visually be done with this. And if that is important to you, then let's do something that really inspires the user rather than the standard block of text that everyone else is going to be doing. So overall, it's a little bit amateur, but, and again, I caveated this at the start of the video, that Bedworld is smashing it, right? And everything that I'm saying is with love, with the idea that if they saw this video, they could definitely improve their site from it. So my last one I'm going to be showing you is Nectar. And if I'm honest, I'd never heard of Nectar until I started researching for this video, and I just really liked the look of their site. Now actually, the mattress space has a lot of really big companies that are really selling mattresses in a really nice fashion, and I chose the Nectar one because for me it had some really nice points to it. So when we land on the Nectar page, again, overall kind of feel of the site feels a little bit more premium, a little bit more trustworthy overall. Now again, they have gone with this red to really highlight the sale, which I know I've kind of poo-pooed on the other site. But I think the big difference on this particular one is that red is part of their branding colors. It's also got a slight hue to it, which isn't quite as in your face, so it still adds that contrast without being as jarring as that red we saw on the other side. We're also using that red fairly sparingly in other places, so it's a lot more obvious what we're going on. Now, from a hierarchy of information, we now have the title, we still have the price, but we're highlighting the overall saving, and we're referencing if it's in stock. Our eyes are also drawn to these reviews nice and early on, and actually the buying journey is a little bit more complex from these guys, and that's kind of okay. There's these different things you can kind of click between, and they do make a reference to what those mean. You can then see the pricing, and again, here's the example that I spoke about, is they've automatically defaulted to a king, but you can pick your other options, but presumably king is the most purchased item, so that's why they're starting with that. And then they're doing an immediate upsell there and then. Do you want your mattress topper? Do you want this premium pillow? Do you want this starter pack? Do you want to add a bed frame? There's an argument that maybe there's a little bit too much here, but at least they're designed in a way that's really modular, self-contained, and actually you could delete both of these two boxes and it would still feel really clean and really nice. Now if we flick over to this left hand side, we've actually got what's called parallaxing here, and I've referenced this in some of the videos, but it means that the two things are moving at slightly different speeds, and it makes it seem like the left hand side is completely static, which means I can click through these very benefits driven imagery to learn more about them. And I think that's a really nice way of doing it as well, and highlighting, you know, which one's right for you, some of that imagery. If you compare this to some of the imagery we saw in the last one, which was essentially the exact same mattress just shot slightly closer, the difference on this one is obviously very dramatic. As we get down, we then have an add to cart button, which is nice, really stands out, really clear what's going, and we do have this option to break it down into monthly payments if we want, 0%. Really nice way of doing it. I also like this little carbon neutral icon that we've got going on, which is really cool. Big thing for me is if you can afford to do this because your product is great, for me, if you can lean into those other obvious competitors and talk about why you're better than them, let's do this. And this was one of the main reasons I wanted to reference them. Emma and Simba are really well known in this space, possibly, you know, and almost a default that Nectar is trying to catch up with them. So the fact that they're saying like, hey, guess what? Our foam is thicker, it's more depth, it's got this climate neutral options built in, and these ones don't, for me, it just immediately answers any of those objections why they would buy from them when they should be buying from Nectar. I think that's a really nice way of doing it. And a bit like I mentioned on the Bellroy website, that now one of the big things that we saw on Bellroy and we're also seeing on this website is actually, yes, we want the top of the page to have the basic information, and probably for 80-90% of users that's all they'll need to see, but there's also a percentage of users that really want to be sold to make sure they're getting that right choice. You know, they're the people that in this example here will want that which best buy, they'll want to do that additional research, and as we go down here they make an effort to try and explain everything to them. So this isn't important to everyone, but to quite a few people, they want to know the different layers and what the different layers are doing and how they're going to help, and that's going to really sell to the user. You know, it might also be really interesting. I'll go, I want to learn about the mattress, I want to learn about the individual support that I got from that mattress, I want to learn about the overall service that I got. So you can actually segment those down as a really nice way of doing it, and not everyone is willing to do that. I also really like this. It's like, you know, one of the biggest concerns you have about a mattress is that feel test. You want to be able to walk up to it, right, and be like, is this too hard, too soft? Most people want to lie on a mattress before they buy it. Like, how do we get around that objection? It's like, let's just highlight where it sits. I mean, the argument of just saying just right, probably a little bit too salesy, but you hopefully get the idea. And I think these sort of imagery to show how it holds you and how some of this moves just really adds to it. Now, I appreciate that animation is way more expensive, and I'm not saying we necessarily need to do that, but I've seen it on other sites where it's as simple as you throwing a ball onto it or sitting on it and you get to see how much it pushes down. It's a really easy visual way to demonstrate how soft that might be. So for me, hopefully you can start to see those overall differences. So hopefully I've converted you to buying a new wallet and a new mattress with this video, but also hopefully that you've learned some really good things around design and how you should approach it, and actually how really it's not just about making something that looks beautiful, but it really answers the user's concerns. And if that's the main takeaway you got from this video, then I'm really pleased with it. If there's any sites you want me to review, please put them down in the comments and I will have a look at them and maybe include them in a future video. Thanks, bye.